And with us right now, we've got Audrey Ehrhardt. Audrey, you are the founder and CEO of Practice 42, just up the road in Tallahassee. You are a certified behavioral consultant. We'll talk about what that is because there's lots of application for this show. And then you are an attorney as well.
I am.
Audrey, you're the classic overachiever. I should say congratulations, because Practice 42, very, very well known in the legal marketing community within Florida. I think you're about the top of the top that I know of. And I know you're regularly sought after for your advice. And so first of all, Audrey, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you so much for having me here. I love the opportunity to talk about marketing of all kinds because, you know, there's really a science to it and a process to it, and really to get yourself, you know, seen as that point of authority, that expert in your community. And so many of us I think we suffer as attorneys. And I say this to myself also, 17 years in, we suffer from shingle syndrome, as I butcher my words. You know, we think, oh, I'll just put up a sign on a billboard and that's enough. And really, you know, as you know, Josh, that's not enough. There's a lot of points of authority that we have to point forward to really get the results we want for our clients.
You started as an attorney, and tell me how you went from being a practicing attorney to getting more and more involved onto the the marketing side of that.
Sure. So I started, of course, as an attorney out of law school. I went to a firm. So I was an associate, became a partner, kind of a normal track, I think, for most attorneys. Ended up going out on my own, and then kind of had a really weird life event. I guess not weird for other people. I actually had been told we couldn't have children. And then out of nowhere, we got blessed with a crazy child who is amazing. And it kind of changed my perspective on how I was running my practice. My practice had 5 different offices in 5 different cities, and we spanned about 400 miles in Florida. For those of you who know Florida, from Hillsborough County up through the villages. And I had a staff of 5, and I became very concerned, you know, if I was out as the leader, what was going to happen? So I ended up writing these really intense manuals for my team on how we would do anything. Here's how you turn a computer on. Here's how you here's how you make a document. You know, really the overachiever control freak side of things. But after my son was born, I ended up having the opportunity to turn those into textbooks to teach lawyers. How do you market? How do you run a practice? And then my husband and I ended up being relocated to Tallahassee, so further north, for his job, moved our household, and I ended up running my practice virtually for 2 years. I was there for 2 weeks a month, and then 2 weeks I was out. And so had a really unusual experience as a lawyer, but then the amazing thing happened. I got an offer to sell it to a couple of different firms when they found out I could move. Yeah, so I sold my practice, which no one really does, and then got hired by a legal software drafting company to come in and implement my manuals, my textbooks on how to practice law, how to market your practice, how to build the staff that you need. And so I had that great corporate experience for 4 years. And then left because I was hired by an international marketing agency at a gap year. Usually you're supposed to have them after college, but I had a gap year where I got to learn firsthand from some marketing giants of how to do things. They hired me to build out their infrastructure on the HR side. And as attorney and as a textbook writer, that worked for me. But I really learned that a lot of the principles that applied to marketing that I already knew worked in a large scale. And so that really gave me the momentum and the desire to show lawyers how they can maximize their own reach in their community. So I opened my own shop, Practice 42, about 5 years ago, and it's been great.
Yeah. Well, and when you started, who was your first client? And what work did you do? How did they find you?
Sure. So for Practice 42, my first client, what you'll laugh, it was a longtime friend and colleague in Virginia. Her name is Donna Wilson. And she reached out to me, and I said, well, you know what? And she actually reached out to me to be her coach, to be her law practice coach, to really help her get where she wanted to go for success. And I said, you know what, candidly, as friends, I'm not there right now. I don't want to be there. I want to do marketing. And she said, okay. She said, here is my bucket of dollars. What can you make happen? And we really took it one step at a time, and we tested it out in her practice. And we actually then added, you know, she is an estate planning and elder law attorney. We added some criminal law friends. I hate to say it, but it was word of mouth. When I started telling people, hey, this is my new venture, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be totally transparent with you, because you shouldn't pay for something that doesn't get you ROI, return on investment. Let me be transparent. Let's grow it together. And so that was my first client. She's doing great. She has She also suffers from the overachiever syndrome. She has 5 offices in the Williamsburg, Virginia, and surrounding areas. And so very successful. We still do her marketing. We do coach her now because she got on me that I had to do that. So it's good.
So what are attorneys typically, or so we should say like historically, what has been the stronghold of legal marketing, and how has that changed over the past, say, 5 years or so, or 5-10 years?
Sure. I mean, I'll give you a quick throwback that, it wasn't until the late 70s with the Bates versus Arizona Supreme Court case, we were even able to market as attorneys. Before 1975-ish, you're going to have somebody on here who quotes me and is like, no, it's 1973. But before 1975-ish, we couldn't have anything more than a shingle or tombstone ad. So your name, your phone number, and your street address. So we didn't even talk about websites then. The first attorney website was in the late 90s. And so things, as you can imagine, have just dramatically moved forward. One of I think the biggest challenges we've seen in the last 5 years has really been the shift to mobile search. Most attorneys are very used to a desktop, a standard computer experience, and that's just not where the internet is. The internet now has adapted itself for the digital side of marketing to be able to answer smartphone questions. So questions when you hold up your phone and ask Siri, we have to be able to capture that market on a website, and it has to work well and play by the Google rules. And I think, all the traditional things that we've done as attorneys, building referral networks, strengthening our relationships with our clients, getting out there and speaking, those 3 tenets are still very important. But I find a lot of challenge helping attorneys realize and take the risk, because, we as attorneys, we are adverse to risk. We don't like risk. We'd like to know what the, what is the gray area and how do we avoid it. But really that's where the trust in the digital marketing experts and finding someone who can be transparent, give you reporting, tell you what's working, that's so important. But that is the big shift, I think, in the last 5 years, is being comfortable now. And of course, we all laugh, we shouldn't say it, but what we're facing as a nation, we're finding that more and more important, because if we can't physically get out into our community, what does it look like digitally?
Yeah. So I would imagine then that you probably get attorneys that are doing more traditional advertising. Maybe they've got, bus benches and billboards, and that's kind of their approach. And they think that that's going to, and they're like, well, we're getting business, so it must be working. Is it too fancy schmancy for them to be thinking about things like voice search and that sort of thing?
I think, internally, your gut as an attorney, I know when the head of our marketing team said to me about 1.5 years ago, we have to update all of our websites that we host and that we run. And that's important. I'll make that note for everyone. You should have an open relationship with your host provider and say, what did you do for me this month? For us, about 18 months ago, when we really saw the advent of Alexa coming into homes and, listening to conversations, there's a choice to have your website be optimized for Alexa. We need to do that for Bixby, for Cortana, for Siri, and I think when we share those things with lawyers, it sounds like witchcraft. It sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo. One of my favorite clients tells me that we just do witchcraft for them. And it's very important that is true in some ways. In some ways, your campaign should work without you having to worry about things and just operate. But on the same point, you should be able to say to your marketer, whether in your office or you hire someone, how does this work? How did you make this happen? And that's really the science to marketing. And as lawyers, we're not afraid of research. We're not afraid of big projects and late nights, or at least we shouldn't be. But that also translates to marketing. You should be able to have a really in-depth discussion as, if we do this, then what happens? And so that's a really fundamental tenet, I think, for all lawyers. But I think most lawyers have a knee-jerk reaction that they just want to be word of mouth. And word of mouth today is much different. Word of mouth in the past was, Jerry down the street will send me his best clients, and I'll send my clients to Jerry and things will be great. And that is there, and that is really a thing. But at the same point, we also have digital word of mouth. And the Pew and Nielsen research studies from just last quarter all said that 92% of people trust an online review as much as they trust a referral from their grandmother.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, and if any of us know about digital reviews, that's not how reviews work. And so we want to be very, very careful that lawyers have the right education and make the right investment.
Yeah. So Audrey, speaking of voice search, for example, can you kind of explain how that works? So for marketers or someone who's a business owner, whether or not they're an attorney, how would they get involved in that, and how does it benefit them?
Sure. So, in the late 90s, the 2000s, and even into the 2010 section, we really wanted to just kind of bolster our website. So I was in the Tampa Bay area, best elder law attorney, Tampa Bay, best elder law attorney, Tampa Bay, over and over again. And that used to be how people search things. People search things that way, but they don't search that way now. Really, in the last 5 years, the shift is to long tail search questions.
Yeah.
So questions that seek an answer, and whoever provides the best answer in the less than 1 second that Google uses to search the internet, that's who gets top placement. And so really for our attorney clients, I harp on them: education, 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 and also original education. Don't use someone else's education. It needs to be custom, because Google knows when you're, stacking the deck or using something that your neighbor down the street also has that content, and you're not going to rank. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How about the objection where an attorney might say, well, I don't want to give you this answer for free because then you won't pay me to tell you the answer.
Yes. No, I probably hear that question, 10 times a week at least? Absolutely. No, I get that. I had a team member here at Practice 42, which was like, why are you doing this video with Josh? Shouldn't we keep it behind locked doors? No, because there's all these books on it. We've all read them. The Go-Giver, the habits of highly successful people. The more you give, the more you get. There you go.
Right here.
Right there.
Bob Bird.
Perfect.
I got you. I'm holding your book right here, buddy.
Exactly. And that's the thing. People hire people that they like, know, and trust.
Yeah.
And I think traditionally for attorneys, we sit back and go, well, that's our referral network. Those are the local community of professionals who trust me. But really, it can also be the internet. And we have so many studies from legal trend reports, and any of these that people are interested in, they can ask me and I'll send it to them. But in these legal trend reports, we find out that 60% of consumers want their answers before they sit in front of you, or they won't pick up the phone to call you. And I understand that fear that, your intellectual property is your intellectual property, but you can choose what you want to give. And you're not going to tell them how you make a document or how you're going to do the representation, but you can take their fears out of the equation and say, I am here for you. Here's a snippet of what I do. We're going to talk more about it when you come in and schedule a meeting in my office.
Right. Because here's, one-to-many education. Audrey, I'm obviously asking you some very specific questions, and these are good general answers, but people don't pay for general answers anymore. That's what YouTube and podcasts and all that one-to-many educations, blogs, that's free. And I think that one-to-many education is getting harder and harder and harder to monetize that, selling e-courses that's one-to-many, that sort of thing. But people will pay for, Audrey, you had said ... Can you make sure that advice works for us, or we're a little special or unique, or this is our audience? Listen, everybody's unique, and the platform, unless you're, if you're truly advocating for your client's success, yes, the general principles are going to get them 80, 90% of the way there, most cases, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But it's that 10% that's what I want to pay for. We had one guy that put hours and hours and hours worth of content on YouTube that we wanted on regards to our pipe drive. And then he said, well, or you can hire me, and I'm $600 for a session. I'm like, oh, done. I just want you I applied everything you taught. I want you to check my work.
and that's exactly right. I agree with that. No,
why on earth would I hire somebody else to do that? Because then I'm like, well, listen, I already spent an hour or two learning from this guy. So you go watch his videos first, and then you can blah, 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 blah. It's no, I just hire plus I want to reciprocate. I want to give back to someone who was that giving, that generous with their education, with their wisdom.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. And I think there's a lot of lawyers who sit back and go, man, the minute I put something on YouTube or I share something on Facebook, I'm going to devalue my brand. I'm not going to keep everything for myself. And I would say it's exactly the opposite. The more places you can be found as a point of authority, the better. I mean, that's what secures that deal. And if you show up on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube and on Google My Business and on your own website and on the news, and you have all these points of authority, it's great. That's what you want. And it's interesting. Most consumers for lawyers are either looking for an immediate answer. I need something today to solve a problem that happened to me today. And they're looking for that response. Or they're someone who's shopping. They're like, I think I may need this. You know, my grandmother told me I need this. I'll probably need it at some point. So they're shopping. So you can actually solidify their mindset, because as they look for that answer, you'll be the person that they go down that rabbit hole of finding content and learning from. And they don't need you today. But 3 years from now, they'll be like, oh, remember Josh? I watched all those videos. Now is the time. Today I have a problem. Let's solve it today. And call Josh, who I remember. You know, I liken it for a lot of our attorneys who used to try really hard to get articles in the newspaper. And I'm not saying that that is not relevant anymore, but it's not necessarily being delivered to everyone's door anymore. Yeah. But what will happen is the person who read that newspaper article 10 years ago will remember it. I still remember when I was practicing, I would write articles for the newspaper, and I would have clients come in with a graying frayed piece of paper that said, remember when you wrote this 6 years ago? Not really, but okay, that's great. So I'm glad that we have that. So much the same thing, I think any of the digital marketing aspect lends to that. But it's also, I would say to anyone who's listening, it's a stacking promise. It's not just Facebook. It also needs to be Twitter and LinkedIn and Google and your website and YouTube. They all have to integrate so that we have multiple places pointing to the source of authority.
Yeah, right. So, and think about it from this, we've been talking a lot about kind of the farming, where we're just kind of building this foundation and bigger and broader and broader. We're able to serve people with more authority and more depth of knowledge and more, trust indicators, and, making it easier for people to spend time with us. But there is still that visibility and awareness thing that, that obviously we're building toward. But Audrey, people still want to make sure that they are seen in front. And so from an advertising perspective, what do you see working really well right now?
It's interesting. I always think of, do you remember that Tootsie Pop owl back from years ago, that old
How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop?
Exactly.
And let's find out. 1,
exactly.
2, 3.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. That is how I often describe legal marketing to attorneys, because you want to think of the internet that way. On a best day, we have maybe 90 seconds with a person paying attention. So when they're searching for that answer, how do we get in front of them immediately? And so when you think about paying for your dollars of advertising, so they ask a question on their smartphone of Siri. Siri searches the native internet browser on the phone, or maybe you're using something else, but let's say it uses Safari. It goes there and starts to filter through those questions. Wouldn't it be great if you were the first person in ad, and then also maps, and then also organic search? And so that is paid advertising. And so I recommend to my clients that we use Google Ads for advertising, because you think about it from a perspective of Facebook, or a perspective of any of the other legal marketing avenues. And there's a bunch out there that you can pay to market within their own platform. You can even market to pay to play within the yellow book. But you have to think about the internet. So I've taken the action to click or lick that lollipop to open up to ask a question on my phone. Now I'm going to take an answer. That needs to be the second lick, because the third lick needs to be contacting you when they're on your information. If we invest in something that is not Google right now, and 95% of America uses Google for search, if we use something else, we're betting that they're going to go to that secondary platform and search again. And so it's very dangerous, because you've got such a limited attention span. Is someone even going to search a second set of results? So I recommend to all of my clients, if we're going to advertise, it's going to be, two things. It's going to be Google or Facebook. That's my first recommendation, because people will search natively in Facebook as well. But secondarily, I always caution my clients that really we also can pay for just good SEO, or search engine optimization. So instead of paying for the ad, which people may not click on, we can instead invest in your website and raise its presence up. Because we're always told by reports that only about 26% of people actually trust an ad enough to click on it. Yeah. So it's better to use that as a authority, and then them search you lower down. But I hate to say it, page 1 of Google for your industry is incredibly competitive.
Yep.
And
Yep,
just because
for sure.
it works today doesn't mean it's going to work tomorrow. So we
Exactly.
have to invest in that search engine optimization. And unfortunately, most people in my industry, until we start talking to them, think it's just enough to have a website. And what I tell everyone I talk to is a website is really just a business card today. And so it doesn't help you if your business card is in your pocket.
Yeah.
If we hand it to somebody, then it helps.
Yeah.
And so that's how we want to think about all of our digital marketing.
So Audrey Ehrhardt, I'm on your website right now, practice42.com. For the person who's been listening to us and they're like, I like what Audrey has to say,
Sure.
where would you lead them to, so that they could kind of get into your world?
Absolutely. I would say go to practice42.com/contact us. The contact us page, best way to get in touch. I am very aware of everything that comes in the door. I'm always on the onboarding calls. We want to get to know you. We want to talk to you. Even if you're not ready to hire us yet, we teach 2 to 3 hours of free educational webinars and CLE for you attorneys every month. And we would love to have you follow us on social media. Facebook, Practice 42 Facebook is very active, but you can also fill out a contact us form and just let me know and we can schedule a time to talk. I always do 30-minute brainstorming calls because I want to know what interests our lawyers who are seeking help.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Again, practice42.com, and the link to contact is right on the front page here. So just look for that. Audrey, thank you so much. It's fantastic. I really, really appreciated you freeing up 30 minutes to your schedule to kind of share what you do and the wisdom that you've shared. Audrey, thank you. Have a wonderful
Thank you, Josh. Excellent. Thanks for the opportunity.